Hello, everybody. Welcome to Soul Streams.
Welcome on in.
My name is Tara Aal, and if you're tuning in for the first time, I used to say evolutionary astrologer because that's my roots, but these days I'm studying Vedic astrology, and I've done a little esoteric astrology, and I dabble in a little bit of classic astrology. So I'm just
Multifaceted
yeah,
astrologer.
yeah. I'm an astrology lover here to share that with my friend Richard James. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I agree 100% with you. Definitely evolutionary astrology I think is a big part of the training, but both of us have dove, I should say, into the
Mhm.
Vedic side of things to explore that world. And we both explored esoteric astrology as
Mm.
well. Um, on our quest for meaning, right? And finding those answers to those deeper questions. So, yes, welcome on in.
Yeah. So we're here to talk about Libra season. And in our usual fashion, we kind of pass the baton back and forth and talk about what we see and what we feel. Um, we can start by saying we can like go to the calendar that on September 22nd, that is when the sun
Yeah.
moves into Libra, and that will happen at 11:19 a.m. Pacific time. And it's
Boom.
interesting that day because Mars um,
100%.
also will move into Scorpio that
Scorpio.
day. So we
Yeah.
have this little sort of boom, boom, boom change of energy. The
Yeah.
this time for every transit or every day, let's say every day that I felt like there was like an oomph of something to talk about, I came up with a little phrase. It's kind of
Ooh,
my way to work with words. So for that particular day on September 22nd, I have peace is not always balance.
yeah.
So,
I love that actually. That's a great way to lean into Libra, right? Because especially with Mars coming into Scorpio, appreciating that, sometimes conflict is a part of peace, right? And that
mm,
we need to embrace sometimes the discomfort of having a disagreement or having conflict, and how we handle the conflict, I think, could pave way towards peace. Uh, but I think it's a really unique a way to start off the season as well, because just the day before on Sunday, we have the eclipse on the 21st at
yeah.
29 degrees of Virgo. So it's like, I feel like that is something where just the beginning days of Libra season, we are still feeling the intensity potentially of that eclipse from Sunday. Even though it's a partial eclipse, I still feel like we have to appreciate the potential of what this eclipse could bring to the table. And so I think it does paint a little bit of a picture for the first couple of days coming into Libra season. And, I always like to say for people that the sun is like, if the sun represents the center of our solar system, and we think about it from that perspective, the center of our solar system is entering Libra. And and it's almost like the Libra themes are going to become super emphasized.
Mhm.
And I think as we start off this right after the eclipse, I feel like can intensify that the Libra themes. Like where are our commitments? How are
Mm.
we being tested with our commitments? Where are we, what do your scales look like? Actually, that's a way I would also look at it. Like, are your scales properly balanced, or are they tipped in one direction over the other? Like, are you putting everyone else first, or are you putting yourself first over everyone else? Libra seeks to find that balance. And I always feel like, I don't know if you agree with this, but I always feel like sometimes Libra is like one of the most challenging archetypes to get anchored into,
Yeah.
because I think balance is something that we as human beings really struggle with.
And I think even our definition of balance is normally skewed, right? Because to
Yeah.
your point, I loved how you led into, well, with the conflict part, because Libra is it is a cardinal sign, which means its natural energy is to be assertive and to initiate things, but it is very concerned about relationships and about what other people think and about social appropriateness. And so oftentimes it tends to be more on the passive aggressive side and tends to avoid conflict. But life is conflict, right? The without conflict, we would all conflict to me shows differences.
Yeah.
Life is about differences. With
So,
if there are not differences, it's like it's funny. I was talking with a friend earlier today, and we were saying it's like in a teeter-totter, everybody's sitting on the same side, right?
yep.
There's no tension, there's no dynamic, there's no, sexy energy back and forth. It's just sort of all the same kind of huddling over here on one side. And
Yeah.
so I think when we come into Libra season, every year when we come into Libra season, this one even more because we're coming right off that eclipse, the sort of checkpoint of what is out of balance is key. And I always think of Libra as one of the most extreme signs.
Yeah.
I don't mean extreme in an Aquarian type of way, but extreme in the sense of all the way to this side, all the way to
Yep.
that side. And so one of the things I had written down was check in on extremism.
Yeah.
Where are you? Where do you go to extremes? Where, so when I think of extremes, like where do I always do this? Where do I always not do that? Where do I completely default to this side? And
Yeah.
it's interesting with Mars. This is the funny thing too. Sun moves into Libra, and Libra kind of, likes to make things nice on the surface. It doesn't necessarily want to go too emotionally deep because that gets messy and that gets into territory where lots of unpleasant, ugly things can come up by our definition. But Mars in Scorpio is like the soul rotor rooter, right? I'm
Yes.
like, it's like, let's go deep in here and let's pull this stuff in and out. In some ways, those two energies are not comfortable with each other.
No.
So I might say part of the balance I think that Libra offers is a way to feel in harmony with yourself, even when things are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Comfortability does not necessarily mean that things are in harmony. In fact, sometimes feeling comfortable is a sign that we're not willing to, feel where the tension is. So yeah,
Totally.
I agree with you.
That that reminds me of Pema Chodron's book, Comfortable
Mm.
with Uncertainty, and
Yeah.
learning to become comfortable with uncertainty and being okay with not knowing. I think a lot of people in the month of September have been feeling that that not knowing energy. Like, I don't know how this is going to play out. I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't have an answer to this. I don't know when this is going to happen. And there's something about this that's like, I do think it's okay to remain uncomfortable in the not knowingness and sit in that uncomfortableness of not knowing, because there's also a magic in that space as well. And what I think is unique is right after Libra season starts on the 23rd, we have a series of transits that I think are kind of supportive for what you and I are talking about.
Yeah.
And we're going to have the Sun trine Uranus and Pluto.
Yep.
And then Mars is going to have an inconjunct to Neptune, and the Sun will oppose Neptune. So our transpersonal planets are all being activated by the Sun and Mars. And
Mhm.
there's something about this, like I like kind of where we're going with this, because I do feel like there's a gift in the depth and in the ability to kind of allow ourselves to swim in some of that uncomfortable territory, because there may be like nuggets of wisdom or parts of ourselves, uncovering parts of ourselves,
Yeah.
and bringing that to the surface so we can shine this brighter. I also could see coming out of this eclipse, if there are people that are trying to initiate changes or are going through the whole concept of closure and starting
Yeah.
something new, or starting something new and like whatever these cycles are, which are very common with these eclipses. I don't know. I just feel like this is a really interesting energy to have that air trine, um, right at the start of Libra season. And it's an air trine with Uranus and Pluto, which I just think is even more exciting for me, because I'm interested in what information am I learning. And I feel like this could be, what am I learning about myself? Who do I
Mhm.
like? There could be a lot of, I could see some people going through an identity, like who am I, who do I, like some sort of revealing of this, if we are willing to kind of allow ourselves to do what Mars and Scorpio is asking ourselves, because Mars is having that conversation with Neptune and Aries, and that has so much to do with elements of revealing our most authentic individual stuff, like who am
Mhm.
I and
Mhm.
what needs to be stripped away.
Well, and actually, it's interesting because on those 2 days, the 23rd and 24th, I'm right with you. We have that grand air trine with Sun, Pluto, and Uranus.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, within those 2 days, we have a yod, right, with Neptune and Uranus and Mars.
Yep.
So you're right. And it's interesting because the Sun and Mars both have a lot to do with our vitality and our energy. We sometimes say that Mars is the henchman to the Sun. So
Yeah.
here we've got both of them in different configurations. But one of the things I made a note about, Glenn Mitchell in his book on aspect patterns, he talks about that grand trines are always closed circuits so for example, because this one with Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini and Sun in Libra, it's a grand air trine. Air
Yeah.
is social intellectual. So it's a closed circuit of social intellectual energy, which sometimes means I can stay inside my, I always think of these grand trines like it's a little fortress. I'm going to stay inside.
Yeah.
I don't need to get information from someone else. I don't need to be so social. So there can be this thing about staying inside. Now, it can also bring huge gifts in those areas. But one
Yeah.
of the notes I wrote down is that closed circuits have limits. That's my note for the 23rd. And
Yeah.
I think that Mars, with its quincunx or inconjunct to Neptune and Uranus, can help eject us from these closed circuits we find ourselves in. This could even
Yeah.
mean my closed circuit of my friends or my colleagues, or and you and I, it's interesting. You and I both in our personal lives are going through some big transformations of where we teach, where we share, where we do our astrology. Isn't it
Yeah.
interesting that here we sit together thinking about in our own circuitry?
Yeah.
How is there space to get out? So that is, go ahead. I can
No, I
make
love it. I just love this feeling of this jot. And what's so funny is I actually didn't write this down, and now I'm just leaning into it because for those of you that tune into our Virgo video, you and I spent a lot of time talking about all of these yads that we had during Virgo season.
and you normally catch the odds and I miss them.
I
So
did.
I'm proud of
Yeah.
myself that today I caught the
And
odds.
I didn't even put two and two together. And what's unique is that now we're leaving it was Aries and Aquarius before, and now we're going to Aries and Gemini.
Yes.
And so because before
Yes.
we had Pluto involved in this, and now what's happening is that I ask us, well, what do Aries and Gemini bring to the table? What are they asking of us, right? And there's something about this that is unique because as this is all happening, Mars is going to square Pluto on the 24th.
Mm,
And
yes.
I'm looking at this and I feel like this specific dynamic of Aries and Gemini feels like, okay, of course, we are Gemini naturally for me in this type of with Uranus and Gemini is helping us. It could be freeing ourselves from our own understanding of things, how we
Yep.
perceived things, and Neptune and Aries could be help getting rid of the old way of how I did things and how I took action or whatever it might be,
Mm,
so I could do this all in a new way. And ironically, that Neptune is responding to Mars. Mars rules that Neptune, and Mars in Scorpio is going to encourage us to plunge to those depths, to be willing
yeah.
to uncover, unravel, expose. I use the word expose because Mars is going to square Pluto. And that
Yes.
specific square, anytime Mars and Pluto come together, it has the potential to be a very intense transit where it shows up in our
Yeah.
charts.
Yep.
And this specific square is that last quarter square. And so I do think I feel this in my life. You and I were just talking about this. I feel like I'm going through a massive crisis in my own belief systems.
Yep. Oh,
And there's something happening in the way that I'm taking action and how I'm doing things. And Pluto is, saying, well, is this aligned for the greater good? Are you like, am I doing this for the betterment of others? And so there is something that comes out here where I feel like this could feel like a realignment in some way for some
yeah.
people, a realignment, because in evolutionary astrology we tend to talk about Mars as kind of the lower octave of Pluto,
Yeah.
and so Mars is kind of where we're making those choices and decisions consciously. And coming out of this eclipse, maybe we have made some choices or decisions, or we need to kind of change the way we're doing things or how we're acting on things. We are doing something different, and Mars and Scorpio is going to kind of give us that blessing to be able to uncover, reveal what that might look like. um and so I think we're starting off Libra season very, very strong
Yeah.
with that.
Do you think, Ricky, that there's something in there with the sometimes we feel like we're consciously doing all these things, but the truth is we're all at the mercy of our unconscious. It really
Yeah.
runs most of things. And I feel with that part with that Pluto Mars square, especially a last quarter square, which means they're coming like they're three-quarters away through their journey together,
Yeah.
which can be this crisis of consciousness, right? Literally crisis of consciousness. And you just talked about consciousness, but maybe there's room for us to discover that paying attention to unconsciousness, the things that are rising up might be important. My friend this morning that I was meeting with, who is a therapist and an astrologer, she was talking about the energy of the unconscious being like the wind blowing through the trees. You can't see it. You can't see the unconscious itself, but you can see how it's moving in our lives. And I feel like that's part of this energy. You asked a great question with the yod. You said, what is it that Aries and Gemini can bring? What came to me when you asked that question is that both Aries and Gemini, Aries ruled by Mars and Gemini ruled by Mercury, both bring movement.
Yeah,
And Mars in Scorpio, Scorpio is a fixed sign that sometimes gets stuck. So I
exactly.
think that Aries and Gemini help bring movement. They help bring movement to something that might be frozen in the Scorpio space of things, or that might be down there in the sludge. And so I'm going to bring up another word because my little phrase for the 24th of September is intimacy is not possible without honesty.
Yeah,
And that includes with yourself. And Mars in Scorpio, that is really at the apex of this yod or finger of fate, is everything about having the courage to be honest to the level that we can. And
yeah.
that's not always easy. And this is again challenges that Libra, because Libra's going to, oh, but that doesn't sound nice. And that doesn't look pretty. And that's messy. And I don't want anyone to know that that's going on inside me. Better put that back in the, back in the closet. But what this is saying is that true Libra at its, I guess, heart has room for all of that. And I
Yeah.
love this sort of spin on it. I feel like even I myself oftentimes don't allow Libra, the archetype, its full expression. I'm kind of fascinated. I have Libra on my descendant. Now I'm thinking, whoa, is this like for the first time in all my years doing this? That's really clicking for me. Interesting. Yeah.
And it's unique, it's happening as we're coming into Libra season, as
Yeah.
it's coming
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
I think that's also part of that air trine too. It's like I feel like
Yeah.
there's something magical, I think, about this. Like you were just saying, and I love this idea of the movement, or the momentum, giving it the
Mhm.
push that is needed, um, to do what Mars and Scorpio does best. And I also love the word intimacy.
Mm.
And I think I always stress with Scorpio or Mars and Scorpio the importance of self-intimacy and what that even means to be able to love all parts of yourself to the depth without, ridiculing, chastising, or anything like that. And there's something about this that I could see some people going through massive self-development. It's a massive self-development time.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
especially if you have any major planets at the very early degrees of Gemini or Aries or Scorpio, this is going to be a really, really big felt energy. You'll feel this
Mhm.
transit come up for you. Um, and and yeah, I love it. I love what you said. You have me thinking. I'm thinking myself, and I'm like, huh. I was
Me
like,
too.
what's going on?
Secret, I mean, maybe it's not so secret, like, but reveal here, one of the main reasons why we do this together is for how it helps us reveal things to each other and to
Yeah,
ourselves. So thank you for
yeah.
like giving us the space to do what
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Because we're
Yeah.
all learning, we're all growing. It's all a natural
Yeah.
process, and so
Yeah.
I love being able to bounce ideas and what we're feeling intuitively, and through the transits, what's showing up for us. So I think that's also very Libra, right? Because Libra is all about
Yeah.
sharing,
Yeah.
and being able to have that space where we can give to others and receive, and I think it's very much that this is very Libran for us to do that.
It is.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, and there's literally like two of us back and forth. And so,
yes,
and there's things that you say that I would never say that way or never pick up on. But when you say them, sometimes all the dots click together. And I think
ditto,
that's one of the coolest things about finding people that really are your partners in whatever
ditto,
avenues of life. It's such a Libra thing.
100%, exactly. Um, I'm looking so I was looking at what I wrote down next. I had an interesting transit that I wrote
Cool.
down, which was sorry, Mercury, square Jupiter.
What date?
Uh, that's on the August 1st. And
Oh,
I
October
wrote
1st.
October I do that all the time, by the way. August, October, they're all
For the record. Right.
it's just, we are talking about October. I
We
do that
kind of
all the
we
time.
kind of know when and where we are. Anyway,
Yes.
yeah.
That happens to me all the time. People who know me that I say that all the time.
Yeah.
That first week of October, we have Mars squaring Jupiter, Mars opposing Chiron, and then Mercury, and then Mercury quincunxing Saturn. It's like a trio of transits with Mercury on the first, the third, and the fourth, which I thought was interesting
Mm,
coming into that full moon. And what I just wanted to comment
yeah.
on that is those specific transits. Mercury is it's unique because in certain respects, I feel like there's challenges that are showing up for us in our like in our conversations that we're
Yeah.
having. Coming into the full moon in Aries, I just made a note that I would be very aware of the conversations and the themes that are showing up coming up into the full moon
Mm,
because we
mm,
have so much Mercury influence coming into it, and Mercury rules the South Node. It makes me wonder what opportunities or what invitations are happening for us to heal. And Jupiter is kind of like what we call here is like a flashlight, a beacon of light that gets
yeah.
shown for us. And in a way, Jupiter in Cancer has been wanting us to discover what home means to us and defining that inner sense of inner emotional security. When we're dealing with Libra, sometimes we'll compromise our sense of
Oh.
security and our sense of stability for others. And we might not say what needs to be said because we're afraid and that they're going to leave us, and all of these different thoughts come up. But I feel like to go from Jupiter to Chiron in Aries right after the opposition,
Mm,
I feel like there can be difficult relationship conversations happening around this time coming up into the full moon in Aries. And keep in mind, it is the full moon in Aries. This is about me. This is about the I, right?
yeah.
And so it's unique because I feel like there's something about this that I'm just sensing in my body, like some discord
Mm,
in potential relationships or negotiations or contractual agreements. And there's something in Aries, the full moon in Aries, I think that's coming into it
mm,
that I think for those of you that are sensitive, and I always say this, you know, being a Cancer, you probably feel this. You could feel the full moon coming before the full moon is even here.
hmm.
And I feel like that could intensify or illuminate those Mercury transits coming into the full moon.
Yes. It's funny. I noticed the Mercury stuff, but I kind of skipped over it, and I'm so glad you didn't. Like, I'm so glad you put it in there because Mercury literally is the storyteller. And so if we have all this opportunity, we all know this, but our ideas and our beliefs around things, that frames everything. So you just sort
Yeah,
of gave us a little trail to perhaps looking at that differently so that when we come into this full moon, there's more awareness. And full moons are all about opposition between sun and moons. It's all about being able to see things more clearly, see things in a new light.
yeah. And it could be something with our, like I said, with other, when we're dealing with Libra, we're dealing with others. So there's
Yeah.
definitely going to be some other influence here. This could be wherever Libra may be in your chart. This could be others at work. This could be coworkers. This could be family. This could be lover, whatever
Yeah.
it might be. There can be disagreements here.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes I think when you have Jupiter in Cancer, Chiron in Aries, I feel like sometimes are we compromising or sacrificing what needs to be said for the sake of, like you started off in the beginning today, for the sake of maintaining peace? But
Yes.
is that really peace? Or is this just going to
Yes.
prolong? I shouldn't say I say this. This comes from Jeffrey Wolf Green, where he said Libra tends to connect to chaotic energy. And he would say this because sometimes Libra won't say what needs to be said. And what ends up happening is when we're not being honest and authentic and we're not, for the sake of trying to maintain peace, we actually create chaos because it just builds a bigger
Yeah.
problem. And so I always like to say whenever I see strong Libra transits like this, it's like I always reflect back to are the scales even for us today? Like,
Yeah.
does this feel balanced for me? Do I feel like there's an equal give and take of energy?
Yeah.
There might not be coming into this. There may feel like something feels a little off. Um, and I don't think it's a you know, it's like a crisis per se, but I do think there it could feel a little like communication could feel very choppy coming into that full moon in Aries, and the moon will be in Aries, you know?
Yes.
Um, and that can, like I say, intensify some things coming into that full moon.
Well, and on the
Just a
day,
small,
no, it's so perfect because on the day of that full moon, the full moon will be October 6th at 8:47 p.m. But that morning, Mercury moves into Scorpio. So I'm going to say it's almost like while it's in Libra, well, let's see what we can do here before we take the deep dive is one of the things I
yeah,
think about. And some of the things I wrote at the top of my paper, some of you know, like my notes tend to look like this. So
yeah.
there's
I
like
love
a,
it.
but at the top I wrote a note that making nice is not nice.
Yeah.
And I feel like
100.
and that also nice is often not kind.
Yeah.
So I think the things you were just talking about with that Aries full moon and leaning into that energy, and especially with that Mars in Scorpio and Mercury moving into Scorpio, we start to question
Yeah.
what the things that we think we're doing to keep the peace, as you say. Oftentimes, those are just indirect, passive ways to suppress our anger and resentment at not being able to say what we really think, share what we really feel, and say what we do and don't want. And
Yeah.
I think those things, I mean, and most of us, I mean, if you were like me, you were raised that way. So there's no, I'm not,
Can't beat yourself up.
right. It's how most of us learn to do things. Most of us
Yeah.
have not learned the beauty of embracing inner conflict. And because of that, we play our conflict externally because that's
Yeah.
the only way we know to deal with it. So there's a lot of invitation here to really look and see what are the parts inside yourself that really want different things or have very different agendas. That's normal, by the way. You
Yeah.
guys have heard, I sound like a broken record when I say this, but the idea that we're going to fully integrate into one sense of self that all feels the same thing all the time does not ever happen. The unconscious is made up of all kinds of energies and archetypes and spirits that move through and in us, and they have very different agendas and very different feelings, and that's life. Because just like there's all different energy in nature, we're part of that nature.
100%.
So to think that I'm going to be, my persona is, I'm nice, sweet Tara. I'm nice to everyone. I do what people ask. I'm saying you can see how we start to get locked in these certain things.
100%.
And most of us, if you're like me, are pretty unhappy about it underneath the surface. So to Ricky, to your point, some of this intensity, which my phrase for the full moon is reconsider where the power lies, that is,
Yeah.
may feel to the extent that you have not allowed yourself, to take care of yourself, to want what you want.
Totally.
You'll feel it, I think. Extra, maybe.
And and I think Jupiter, that first square to Jupiter, I think is going to be super important
Mm.
because I want to know how well you're taking care of yourself and how well you're prioritizing self-care, because that may show up where if you're not doing the things that Jupiter and Cancer is asking
Yeah.
for us, there can be a big flashlight on something where you realize that maybe you are burnt out, or maybe you're exhausted, or maybe you're reaching a breaking point. And
Yeah.
I wrote down for this series, which I love the archetype of power,
Yep.
because the gene key for this full moon is tied to gene key 21, which is the shadow of control.
Oh.
And it's interesting because how we as human beings use control to try to um prevent, chaos from happening, because we think that this is how something is supposed to be. When you control, you don't allow for that universal rhythm to unfold in your life because you are maybe afraid about allowing things to happen. This specific gene key, though, does talk about hierarchy and leadership and power. And so I do think this is an interesting full moon to have this gene key be illuminated. Knowing what's happening in the world today, I think this is going to be a really interesting full moon to see what's happening with power around the world, around the country, because the gift of this is true authority. What does authority mean? And one of
Mm.
the lines that Richard Rudd wrote in the Gene Keys was that true authority comes from submission. And there
Mm.
was something about this, and it almost reminds me of like the concept of surrender as well. And I feel like there's something about this that I could see this full moon being in Aries. I could feel like some wounds will come up. There will be something about this. And because in this specific gene key, there is pain, there is hurt, there is wounds that come out of this. And so I think it'll be interesting because the moon will also quincunx Mars, which is the ruler of the full moon.
Yep. Yep.
And so I just feel like there's something about this that, what control do you really have? And or how have you given up control in your own life? Like, how have you
Yeah.
given your power away? Because we're dealing with this Libra influence and we're talking about it already. The stories are being talked days before. So I
Yeah.
feel like this could feel like a recalibration of, or the rebalancing of power in some sort of way. And if those conversations didn't pave way or did not open up those doors like you were saying, I think having Mercury in Scorpio, having Mars in Scorpio,
Mm.
having this full moon in Aries, there can be some tension, there can be some conflict. Aries can feel frustrated and release their anger, and it can come out. And those are kind of, if not kept, you know, how do I want to say it? If not done consciously,
Yes.
it can bring out a lot of shadows. This could totally expose some of those things, which could
Yep.
be exactly what Mars and Scorpio and Mercury and Scorpio want.
Yeah, because it's trying to break it through so we can have some consciousness about it. And it's just
Yeah.
sometimes it has to come through in very forceful, oftentimes unpleasant, challenging ways. One thing I would add is that at this full moon, the moon is conjunct Ceres
Oh yeah. Oh, I
in
didn't write that
Aries.
one.
And so when you were talking about the Jupiter kind of bring a precursor to paying attention to how we take care of ourselves,
Yeah.
Ceres has everything to do with how we nurture and take care of ourselves and feed ourselves, not just food wise, but soul wise, spirit wise. And
Yeah.
Ceres is traditionally a mothering archetype. And so this idea of how are we or are we not mothering or taking care of our own needs to
Yeah.
support our Aries independence? What does it mean to be like, most of you, if you've spent any time with me, I was raised very fundamentalist Christian. So for me, there wasn't a lot of room in my growing up to have my own desires because they had to
Yeah.
match with God's desires, right? That was a requirement in my growing up in my family, or else it was considered to be a bad thing. But in this moon conjunct series, both very moon and series, both probably the most mothering archetypes
Yeah.
we can look at, most nurturing archetypes, but they're in Aries. So that inner parent or inner mother or inner caretaker, inner
Yeah.
nurturer, inner nourisher, whatever word you like to use here, how do you nurture your own independence, your own autonomy, your own strength, your own courage, your own ability to say, I want this, I don't want this?
Yeah.
So, but if we are still looking like so many of us, right? I'm still working through this with my own therapist.
Yeah.
If we are just like saying, I'm not saying I'm like got this all nailed down, but if we still are looking for something outside to feed us, to take care of us, something somewhere is supposed to come along and do that thing for us, we may have some hard knocks in that department too, which I think goes
Totally.
along with the quincunx between the moon and Mars. Because isn't it
100%.
interesting? Mars would be the like moon in some ways would represent the matrix that we're raised up in. Mars wants to get out of it.
Yeah.
Ceres, in many ways, wants to hold on to her daughter because the Demeter is Ceres. So the Demeter Persephone myth comes in here. There's a learning with whatever Ceres touches that we have to share, that we don't get to have something all to ourselves. So
Yeah.
there's so much rich here around what does it mean to have independence, maybe even uh, the extremes of dependence and independence could be very fierce in this lunation.
I was That's what I was just thinking. I was thinking about codependency patterns,
Yeah.
dependency patterns, attachment patterns.
Yes.
I love that you brought series into the equation here. Um, I love this idea, and I'm reminded again that the sun is in Libra, so that beacon of light that is the center of our solar system is asking us to look at our commitments and our partnerships with others.
Hmm.
But this full moon is asking for us to take care of ourselves.
Hmm.
And so this is going to be a chapter where we may need to assert ourselves. There's blessings with the energy to do it,
Yeah.
right? But there's something about this that does speak to needing to embrace more of an autonomous approach. And just because you're doing that does not mean that you're being this selfish, narcissistic person,
Mm.
right? Because so many people that I meet are so afraid to put themselves first because they don't want to be seen as a selfish person. And I think we need to reframe our understanding of what it means to be selfish.
I so agree. I'm super smiling because on October 9th, which is just 3 days after this full moon, these are
Yes.
these are my phrases, no joke.
And we're getting to it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm saying because I'm like, oh boy, like I love it when we get on these, we get on the same page. I said feeling guilt doesn't always mean you did something wrong.
Yeah,
And then I also put taking care of yourself sometimes means saying no. So
100%.
clearly we're in the same, range around this. And anytime we're not taking care of ourselves, most of the time we're projecting that onto somebody else. And so
Yep.
it actually does everyone else a service if we take care of ourselves first. It is not just for ourselves, it is for the
100%.
good of the whole planet. So,
Enlightened self-interest. That's
oh
what
my
I
gosh.
there's a
Yeah.
philosophical term, I think it's called enlightened self-interest, where
Yeah.
it's the best thing you can do is to put yourself first in that way, to take care of yourself, so then you can then do it for others.
Yeah. Aries is so happy right now with this conversation. It's like, yeah, you
Yes.
get me. So, just really quickly, the Chandra symbol for the
Yes.
full moon, 14 degrees Aries, 9 minutes on October 6th. I'm rounding up to 15 for the Chandra symbol. This is interesting. A man with pointed ears, and it says super tuned in. And I'll read just part of it. The personification and embodiment of what it looks like, feels like, and is like to have an inside track on everything going on around you. Uncanny awareness. You have the gift of getting across new ways of being, different ways of looking at things. Somehow getting away with being so very different that it no longer matters.
Hmm.
I think the support, the more you be and do yourself, at some point we can, there's a being able to let go of some of the Libra tendencies of needing it to make or look or be a certain way. At some point,
A hundred
you
percent.
be yourself so radically, it almost doesn't matter. And then you just are yourself. And that's just aligned with nature. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I love that. That I think is perfect for for that full
Yeah.
moon. Um,
I'm personally looking forward to that lunation.
I know, and that's very active for me. So that's a
Hmm.
fun one for me. So I'm excited to see that one come through Aries. Being in Aries, I'm excited for
Yeah.
that one. Um,
And I usually like new moons better than full moons. So it's rare for me to be like, oh, I'm really looking forward to the full moon. I tend to be a new
yeah,
moon kind of girl. So
I'm always good for a moon in Aries. I'm always ready for it.
yeah.
I was like, yes, here we go.
Yeah.
Bring on the energy. Um, the next, coming out of that full moon, I just wrote here that I think is interesting on the 7th. Mercury will square Pluto and then in conjunct Uranus while the moon is still in Aries.
Mm,
I just feel coming out of that full moon I just made a note that that could be an interesting day that I would just kind of like be aware of,
mm,
because having the moon in Aries and having Mercury have these aspects, this could be a little bit of an intense day. Um, that I don't know, something I made a note here of just being aware of how I'm feeling and how other people are feeling. This could be a difficult day for heavy conversation.
yeah.
I would be aware of like our own internal impatience, our own
Yeah.
annoyances, our frustrations, our restlessness. So I made a note here that on the 7th, coming out of the full moon, I think it's really important to ground that Aries energy. So like going for a run or going to the doing something to
Yeah.
ground, because this could feel like an intense amount of energy that's coming up. And I say that because there could be some uncomfortable conversations that are coming out on the 7th.
Mm.
Um, and you wanna be able to be grounded in those conversations if they do show up for you. So I
I,
just made a note.
I'm appreciating that. And as an Aries rising, I know you and I share some Aries bonds of like that's kind of our medicine, a lot of the
Yes.
time. But like when those irritations and frustrations come up, sometimes I remind myself of advice I was given a long time ago that when you are frustrated and irritated, what is it that you're wanting that you're not asking for?
Mhm.
And that can be scary for many of us,
Totally.
but when you find that irritation and frustration, typically it's because there's something that you're not willing to actually ask for. So even in a
Right.
conversation can be if you can pause for a second, what am I actually wanting here? Yeah,
Yeah.
can be huge. And
What am
this
I
is like,
feeling? What am I holding on? And because we're dealing with so
yeah,
much Libra energy,
yeah.
again, I would say if we lean into the potential of having the uncomfortable conversation, you could feel free because of the conversation. And I would just remind you that you're not responsible for how other people receive what you're saying.
Amen.
You just have to be authentic to yourself and then allow for the other person to digest it. Being in Aries, that is something that has always been difficult,
Yep.
because sometimes when you want to communicate the frustration, people look at it and they're like, whoa, 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 that was too much. That was too this. But in reality, what's happening is that it having Aries energy, when that frustration comes out and you're able to communicate it, there's a
Yeah.
release. And that's why I always say like air it almost feels like, for me being in Aries, it like comes in, you feel the intensity of whatever that is.
Yeah.
And once you're able to just get it out into the air, all of the energy goes away and you're like, okay, let's play, let's go have fun. I'm ready. It's like you just need to get it out. and then you're going to feel free enough to go do whatever you want to go do. And then the energy's light and we can move on.
I just
Eh,
I I love that, and especially because sometimes with Aries people say, "Oh, it's just so blunt," and sometimes even Aries is as referred to as sort of like, I don't want to say simple, but in some ways like, "Oh, they're just instinctual or just spontaneous," and it sort of makes it
Yeah.
sound like, but the simple, clear, straightforward, just being what I am is to your point, even if it's uncomfortable, it's not complicated when you truly, one to me, one of the most beautiful gifts of Aries is, granted, it could be super aggressive, it could be super angry, so this is not what I'm talking about, but you may not like what someone's saying or doing, but you don't have to figure out some weird twisted thing when Aries is just being Aries. They're just going to let you know. True pure Aries is just, I don't like it. Let's do this. I want to go over here. And there's
Yeah.
something to me, to your point about that, when you just say it, there's like a release. I feel it's
Mhm.
because there's this simple truth of there's not something complicated. There, it's very, we always say sometimes that with Aries, it may fight and be competitive, but it tends to be honorable, right? This is like a Mars and Aries type of thing too. It tends to be
Yeah.
honorable. Like you kind of know what you're dealing with. And I
Yeah.
and so that, even if in the moment you might say, "Oh, I can't stand that." At least you're not spending the next 50 years trying to figure out
Wondering.
what the hell someone's trying to do
Yeah.
or what their motivation is, you know?
Exactly. 100%. A
Yeah.
million percent. Yeah. So it'll be an interesting day, I think that's an interesting day coming out of this full moon.
Yeah.
And then I made a note, like, it's funny because I look at the first part of Libra season and I feel like there's so much Mercury Mars energy. And then I look at the remaining transit. I'm just looking kind of moving forward and I see Venus. I wrote Venus down a lot. Um, and I just think that was unique because Venus rules Libra.
I did that. I wrote the
And
same thing. Yeah.
and it's just interesting because it feels like as we pave way to the new moon in Libra, Venus is getting a lot of attention.
And
She's asking for something in the second part of October.
so listen, my note, I have Thursday, October 9th, Saturday the 11th, Monday the 13th, Tuesday the 14th. There are Venus aspects all of those
Yeah.
days. Basically, the 9th all the way to the 14th is Venus town,
Yeah.
in my opinion. And then what's interesting after that is the 16th, 17th, and the 19th, the sun is all making aspects.
Yep.
So I made this little note at the top of my page that says the lights and the brights. And I say that because Venus is like the brightest planet, next to the moon that we can see in the sky. And of course, we know the sun is bright. The brights and the lights, they're lit up.
Yeah.
So there's something about this part in here, and I don't know, whether I don't think we probably want to spend the time to break down all of the Venus stuff, but there's aspect to Chiron, to Saturn, to Neptune, to
Yeah.
Uranus. I mean, there's not much left out of the party.
And so what I would say is I always ask myself to make it easier and digestible is for from the 8th into the 11th, Venus will be in Virgo. And so
Yes.
I encourage us to lean into what Venus and Virgo is asking of us and embracing the Venus and Virgo work, which I find Venus and Virgo is difficult for people because it could be overly critical, it could be
Yep.
overly judgmental to the point that either nothing gets done or we push everyone away from us.
Mhm.
And so what I encourage us with Venus and Virgo is to focus on, what can I do to be or do better? Like, where am I at right now coming out of that full moon in Aries? If there were uncomfortable conversations or whatever it might be, we're not going to play the blame game. We're not going to play the victim game. I just want to do and be better. And I
Mm,
feel like there's something about this that does speak to the need of self-care. And
yep.
I would say to have more compassion for yourself,
Mm.
to practice more unconditional love. I'm just looking at some of these aspects, and I feel like that'll help us as Venus comes into Libra.
Could we also say have compassion when you don't feel compassion? I feel like oftentimes we feel like we say we have compassion, but then we're not very compassionate towards the parts of ourselves that don't feel that way. And I think that's an
Yeah,
important thing too. Like most of us have a pretty strong inner critic. Virgos
yeah.
associate with that energy.
Yeah, totally. And the other thing is, from a very general perspective, we know that Venus has a lot to do with our interpersonal relationships.
Yes.
That might be a week you want to watch what's happening in your relationships. That could feel like a little bumpy week. Um, and it it can be very illuminating because then when Venus comes into Libra, she'll have that grand trine.
And that's the
And
13th. We can say every
yeah,
that's Monday the 13th.
and that can be very exciting because Pluto will have stationed direct. And so it's interesting. So coming like the 8th, the 9th, the 11th, the 13th, the 14th, that whole week, I would be watching my relationships with people, whether this is romantic, whether these are any interpersonal relationships I'd be watching. I would ask, like, am I projecting onto other people parts of myself that I'm hoping that they're going to fix or do? That's something I could do for myself.
Nice.
Or are other people projecting onto me and I need to set the standard or the boundary or know where my line is in the sand? Um, that could also be showing up. And then the other big thing I would say is Venus also has a lot to do with our resources and what
Mm.
resource, like how we value our resources, but also like your money and your resources. So this is an also interesting energy. Um, to just watch, like, are there any changes that are happening that week with our finances and our resources, or collectively the economy, for an example? Those would be all things I would be interested in just kind of observing because it's such a strong Venus week.
Do you think the only last thing I would put before we on that Venus, which and this is great, thank you for framing that up so nicely. The on the 13th, when Venus moves into Libra and then opposes Neptune, I think that sometimes with Neptune we can either we can fall under illusions deeper than we were before, or we have these moments of waking up and like, oh my God.
The
So
veil is removed.
yeah, so one of my little notes is watch out for, I put quotes around little because they could be big, but watch out for little lies inside and
Yeah,
out, right? What you tell yourself, what other people may have been telling you. Because it has to do with relationships, you may be able to all of a sudden see into a relationship dynamic where you can, maybe get out of the drama triangle, for example, or you can get out of, whatever
yeah,
space where you have found yourself to be stuck. And I think that in addition with Pluto turning direct, there is something about that. Wait a second, something that before maybe was churning around or being reconsidered, all of a sudden it's like we might have a moment of seeing it if we want to. So,
totally.
yeah.
I agree 100%.
I also had a note that on the 14th there's going to be another grand air trine, right, with
Yeah,
Venus and Pluto and Uranus. And again, going back to the idea that these are can be closed circuits of self-sufficiency, I put a note that that might be a good day if you need it in some way to get an outside opinion. It might be time to get somebody
totally.
else's advice or to seek counsel so that you're not in your closed circuit so much. Yeah,
Totally. I like the 14th. It's an interesting, I like the energy about that. It's
me
interesting.
too.
Um,
Yeah.
so it'll be interesting to see if anything comes through on that day.
Hmm.
Whenever Uranus and Venus come together is an interesting energy for me. I like that day. Like, is there any, contracts that are coming in, money opportunities that are showing? It's an interesting day. Like, I like it. I like the vibe. And then you throw Pluto into the equation, I think is also really, really exciting. Um, so I think the 14th is I'm excited for that day. I'm excited to see what unfolds.
And I can feel in myself, and I've been pulling, oftentimes, most days I'll pull a tarot card just for kind of for myself at different times to tune into things. And I've been pulling a lot of swords and a lot of difficult swords.
Yeah.
And I think that collectively, and that there's a lot of information flying from a lot of different directions, a lot of different frequencies. There's a lot of fried nervous systems.
Oh yeah.
And so this energy could either amp that up in an unhealthy way or help us sort of bring it down, like lower the ampage to what we can actually run. And so
Yeah.
something about what you were talking about Uranus, because it's so linked with the nervous system, and Venus is very connected to the body as well. The body is our number one resource, right? So
100%.
we might think about that as well.
Yeah.
So for the sun, I've got on October 16th, the sun will square Jupiter. On the 17th,
Yep.
sun will oppose Chiron, and on the 19th, sun will quincunx Saturn. And so when we think of the sun, again, you mentioned this, that of course the sun is the center of our solar system, and in ourselves, it's the center of our sense of self or our essence or our core vitality or core personality. So
Yeah.
it's almost like there's something a questioning or poking or trying to get our attention about, what is this sense of self or what is going on at the center. Sometimes it's interesting, the sun is a very associated with the king and queen archetype, which is interesting for me too, especially living in the United States and what we're,
Yeah.
going through around with that type of energy of sort of rulership, I think comes up here too.
Totally.
The one thing I guess I would offer one of my little comments or little insights is that family rules often don't make great relationship rules. And I think that's something that I'm forever reflecting on the things that we learned growing up that we tend to do now unconsciously, oftentimes are
Yeah,
the things that create the biggest struggle. And I'm saying this in particular because when the sun in Libra squares Jupiter in Cancer, there is a squaring off between relationship or partnership and family origin and our deeper emotional roots. So we can oftentimes
totally.
feel push and pull between that, or we might even realize that we've mixed the two up. I mean,
Yeah,
all day long we make our partners our moms or our dads or whatever. So
yeah. No, you know what's unique about this is you have Libra, Cancer, and Aries. And what's happening is
yeah,
it's unique because that does have
natural
there's this
squares.
challenge here. Yeah, and that's a that's challenging with those three. And I
Hmm.
love what you were just saying because it makes me lean into the idea of like what if Capricorn was coming in, and Capricorn does in the
Oh.
sense where Saturn is going to quincunx the sun, but it's in Pisces, but the planet that rules Capricorn is here.
But tell everyone, but I don't want to miss this. Tell for the people that are newer to astrology, explain why you're bringing Capricorn because this is beautiful. It's the one of the cardinal signs or the cardinal cross that's not there. But you talk a
Yes.
little bit more about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so the reason why we're doing this is because Aries naturally rules the first house, Cancer will naturally rule the fourth house, Libra naturally rules the seventh house, and Capricorn naturally rules our 10th house. So this is the natural cardinal square. And so I always like to teach when I look at, for an example, a cardinal sign, I'm always very interested in the other three, like what's going on here. And it's unique because in these 2 days, which is the 16th and the 17th of October, it's Libra, Cancer, and Aries. So Capricorn, I'm asking the question of what can Capricorn bring to the table? And something
So
that you
good.
were just saying was this idea of how I forgot how you said it, but something along the lines of how family rules do not tie into relationship
They
rules.
don't make great relationship
They
rules.
don't make
Yeah.
great relationship rules. And when I feel Capricorn sometimes, and I see something like this, I'm always wanting to evaluate the systems and the structures of our life, right? And there's something about this that maybe there is a reconstruction that needs to happen, right? And ironically, on the 19th, the sun will quincunx Saturn in Pisces. And so there's something that wants to be reconstructed. There's something that needs to be reevaluated, whether it's our family rules, our relationship rules, whether it's my own individual rules, Aries. And what's happening is I feel like Capricorn is trying to get us at some essence. You know, we're trying to create something that is going to last in our life. We want to create something that is long lasting. And I think a part of this, like having Jupiter come in and having Chiron come in Aries, I would be very interested in our beliefs around family systems, our family values. How much do I value my independence? How much do I value how I was raised? How much do I value my relationships? And all of this is unfolding. And what I would say is how much of this is actually dictated from what I've been conditioned to believe. And I think that Sun quincunx Saturn can give us a breakthrough opportunity to shift something here. And it's ironic because then Mercury is conjunct Mars on the 19th as well. And that may be a conversation that needs to be had. You know, that could be the conflict that you and I have been talking about.
Yeah.
This could be the conversation that needs to be had.
I love this. This is great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Rick is really like that's a fun thing I didn't expect we'd do. So it's awesome.
I know. That's how it happens.
I'm all, yay.
And then that paves way to that new moon in Libra, which I'm also very excited about because I feel
Yeah.
like that energy that we just discussed kind of is still lingering with us here.
Yep.
So
And the
that's,
ruler is Venus in Libra. So
yeah.
we're like
And
Venus
it's at the
town, Venus town,
28th
Venus town. We're still
degree.
in Venus town.
Yeah. And it's at that 28th degree, which I think is interesting.
Yes.
I wrote down on this one, I wanted to bring this up because I love the gene keys. This is going to be tied to gene key 50 and gene key 3, which is the shadows of corruption and chaos.
Whoa.
And so I always like to lean into it and ask myself, well, first of all, how do those words exist in my reality?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And what I love about Gene Key 3 is it's tied to the I Ching of difficulty in the beginning. It's only difficult in the beginning. It's only difficult the first time you do something. After that, it gets easier. But to be able to do something for the first time could feel wildly uncomfortable. And that's
Mm.
very cardinal, by the way. That's very common, I think, with
Hmm.
cardinal signs, is as much as you would like to assume that cardinal signs are always, yes, they are our initiators, it doesn't mean that they always like to initiate right away. Um,
Especially
right?
Cancer and Libra. Yeah.
Right. It,
Yes.
it can be difficult to initiate in the beginning because, I mean, think about it from that perspective. It's kind of scary to think that you're the person that has to lead the charge. You're the person that has to start something and everyone else is going to follow you. There's an insecurity in there. And I think that this new moon in Libra, it's unique because it's happening very close to that final degree of Libra. And Jupiter is still here, Chiron is still here, Saturn is still here. I just feel like that energy that you were just bringing up and we were talking a
Yeah.
little bit about, I think is kind of going to be this new moon can be the opportunity for us to either do something new, like this is the chapter that I'm going to take, whether it's a relationship commitment, a work, whatever it might be.
Hmm.
There's something about this that I think could be a where we take action or where we realign something, where we're going to start something, where we're going to do something. Um,
Ricky, this is so good because I'm making a note about choose something because there's a T square. Pluto
yeah.
and Jupiter, Pluto and Jupiter make a T square with the new moon, moon and sun in Libra. And so
Yes.
that uh, point on that T square with which is the new moon, Libra does have to do with choices
Yes.
and choosing. And one thing I would add to this is that um, the notes I put, because it is Libra, I think there's something about asking the question, who's really on your team and whose true ally are you? Because when we make these choices, sometimes if we're aligned or have alliances, and this is especially pertinent because Pluto is an Aquarius in this equation. So the
Yeah.
alliances or the people or the partners on the more Libra side that we have aligned with sometimes are not the true ones for where we're moving forward into. And I think this could be part of the
100%.
equation, part of the thing to consider, especially towards the very end of Libra, where we may have to
Yeah.
make some partnership, relationship decisions.
100%. The other thing I just want to add about those specific gene keys tie to a very creative energy. They come from a creative source. And
Mm,
so there's something about this as well that I realized that we didn't really talk so much about that side of Libra, but there can be with Venus, and I could see this within Libra, and especially with Gene Key 3, there being creativity that could be coming through. And I feel like there's something about the chaotic energy or the corrupted energy serves a purpose. And both corruption has a lot to do with becoming aware of your past and how your past is playing out in your present moment. And it's becoming aware of like how we all come built just like a computer. We all have sometimes viruses in our software that we need to
yeah.
eradicate or we need to work with, whatever it might be. And some of what we're going through might be because of some of those problems from our past and some of those family dynamics, those generational dynamics. And at the core of all of this, these two gene keys are to create something new, to create something beautiful. They are also tied to music. So, just from a gene key
Oh,
perspective, I think this is a great day for maybe attuning ourselves to music. And Libra loves an aesthetic, by the way.
oh
So,
yes.
I think there's something about this that maybe we can do some creativity, some painting, some music work or something like this.
Yeah.
Maybe a really good accent exercise to some of these energies.
I love it. And the corruption, when I think about the asking the questions, whose true ally are you or who's really on your team, the corruption sometimes, I mean, and this is not, I'm just simply saying relationships corrupt as well. There can be corruption just in our relationships in it or in the dynamics of
Totally.
them. So this
Totally.
idea of, for example, to use the example of music, let's pretend I'm playing a piano and it's out of tune and 10 of the keys don't work, right? I mean, this is to your point, a tuning can also be getting things tuned literally like a piano.
100%.
And
Yeah,
sometimes our relationships, we don't know if they could be tuned or not until we try. And that requires kind of the depth of the honesty and the willingness to speak up for what we want or what we need or what we're actually feeling, even if we
totally.
don't know where that will go. And that takes
Totally.
guts, especially for Libra and Cancer archetypes, right? Which are in this mix a lot.
100%. They're getting a
Ricky,
lot of attention this season.
woof, boy, yes, that like
Yes.
self and family and other and public identity work. It's like, man, every angle of identity, on that wheel.
Yes.
And I know we have to wrap it up, but I just want to
Yeah.
mention on the day after the new moon, which is actually the day that the sun will enter Scorpio. But before the sun enters Scorpio,
Yep.
Neptune retrograde moves from Aries back into Pisces. So we now know we're really revisiting some old business in that area. And the sun will quincunx Neptune as well at that 20. So when the sun is 29 degrees Libra at the very end, before it moves into Scorpio, it will quincunx that Neptune retrograde right as it moves back into Pisces.
Yeah.
And I used to scuba dive, and this made me think about before you go to scuba dive, you got to make sure you have the right weight, you have all the right things, so you can have, you basically your weight is distributed right. So when you're going super deep, you can find that sort of balance. And what this feels like to me is a final weight adjustment before we take the deep dive into Scorpio. And so sometimes that means we
Yeah.
have too much weight on. Sometimes we need to add more weight. We need to change our gear. Of course, I'm using this all as a metaphor, but I
Yeah.
think there's that period of time, especially with that Neptune, where we could let things dissolve, where we could see things clearly.
Yeah.
But I do think it's hooked somehow into something, and you brought this up already with the past. I feel like there's this big opportunity to let something go or to release something or to I mean, it's almost like, how Neptune sometimes is super trippy. So you'd be like, whoa, I thought it was this, and now it's moving this way. It's like the
Yeah.
minute that you start to have that connection in that different way,
Totally.
like all of a sudden the fish becomes a bird. Like I'm being kind of silly, but it has that sort of feel.
Yeah. It's unique because I having that quincunx, the last thing I'll just say is
Mm,
I love this idea of how deep we're willing to allow ourselves to go. Because I'm not saying this in a bad way, but I don't know if I would use the word deep with the Libra energy, but Neptune may exactly encourage or cause us to take that deep dive into the Piscean realm, and that may
yeah.
be that some of what we perceived was not true,
Hmm.
um, or something needs to be washed away. And I think sometimes having Libra energy, it can be difficult to let go of something
Yeah.
if it's physical and it's immaterial to you and you have placed importance on that. Whereas Neptune and Pisces doesn't really care. It's just it all is going to go back anyway.
The
And
ocean, right? The ocean is coming in to the sun, whatever I thought was me, my personality, my
yeah,
persona. Don't you feel like the ocean's coming in? And then I just
to
find it
wash something.
And I find it fascinating that then right after the sun goes into Scorpio. So you're right.
Yes.
Libra's like, no, 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 no. But
Yes. You can't
ocean's
hold on
still
that much
coming.
longer. Yeah. But
Your makeup is going to wash off. Let's say that from a
yes,
very like,
exactly. And then you're going to feel so much better in Scorpio season because you're ready for it.
yeah, you'll be naked, but a little more
Yes.
naked, but it'll be a little more you. I like it.
100%. Yes. We did it.
We
I love
did.
it.
Woo.
Thank you.
Ricky,
Thank you
thank
for
you
everyone for
always.
tuning in. Yes, I love
Yeah.
it. So many
Thank
good
you, everyone.
conversations. I appreciate you. And I would love to hear from anyone if they have questions or
Yeah.
anything to drop it in the comments. I always love hearing what people have to say.
Yeah, and we don't talk about it too much, but both Ricky and I, we teach, we do private sessions. We would
Yeah.
love to, if you feel called or drawn, you can find, in YouTube, there's links in here. You can find us because we know we would love to meet you more personally if that's something that feels
Yes.
good to you. Yeah. All
Yes.
right.
Ditto.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. See y'all
Bye,
soon.
guys.
Bye.
We are